We begin with several developments surrounding Iraq. First, Muslims around the world are getting ready for the holy month of Ramadan. But in Iraq, the fighting continues today, and there are reports that armed American drones are now patrolling the skies over the country. There are also indications that any new government formed in Iraq won't include Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki. Grand Ayatollah Ali al-Sistani today saying a new government needs to be formed right away. During Friday prayers, a representative for the Shia clerics saying the next prime minister, speaker, and president should be in place by Tuesday. That is when Parliament is scheduled to meet for the first time. Meanwhile, in an exclusive report, Christoph Putzel of America Tonight spent the last few days reporting from North Iraq. That is where more than 800,000 people now find themselves caught in the crossfire. He found that the divisions that are tearing the country apart have now permeated the camps for those who have been displaced.
We're driving along the highway leading out of Mosul, Iraq's second largest city that was recently overrun by the Sunni rebel group ISIL. The Iraqi government has begun a campaign of airstrikes against rebel targets inside of Mosul. Hundreds of thousands of civilians have fled the city, many to refugee camps in the Kurdish region. Most of the camps, like the fighting itself, are divided along ethnic and religious lines.
We didn't even bring clothes with us. Our house burned and collapsed from within. I have nobody to support me. I am living just by God's mercy. The army and ISL are fighting amongst themselves, and we are caught in the middle.
So this woman that we just met here told us that her home was destroyed a couple days ago by drones, and so she has fled here with her husband. Small little beds here on the ground. The temperature in here must be about 110, 115 degrees.
I don't even have any money to go and rent a house with my husband. We would be better off dead. There's nothing for us. Where are we supposed to go?
An hour away at another camp, this one's still under construction, mostly Shiite refugees were arriving from Mosul and carrying with them a very different story about the fighters who had taken over their city.
It was horrible. We've seen dead bodies before, but never like this. There were bodies in the street with their legs cut off. You couldn't save them.
Many of the men in this camp are Iraqi army and police officers who proudly showed us their various IDs and badges. Much has been made about how easily ISIL has been able to take territory in Iraq, and the Iraqi army and police have been criticized for walking away from the fight. But these police officers insist it has been more complicated than that.
We fought for 5 days and were able to hold them back. On the 6th day at 9 p.m., the setback happened. They used a huge bomb to break through police lines, and then our headquarters fell. And then the whole operation was over.
We couldn't resist them. They had sophisticated weapons and lots of fighters.
These men have good reason to fear for their lives. ISIL has posted various videos online of Sunni rebels, chasing down people trying to flee the city, hitting their cars with a barrage of gunfire until they crash on the side of the road. They've also carried out mass executions of Iraqi military and police.
What would have happened if ISIL had found you with these?
They will cut my head off and my family's heads.
As we were leaving the Shiite camp, we got word that ISIL had attacked another town nearby, once again sending residents fleeing for their lives. Along the highway, we passed car after car packed with people, and the few belongings they had managed to gather in a panic. Christoph Putzel, Al Jazeera, Erbil, Northern Iraq.
And now to the situation in this country. There are reports that armed U.S. drones are now in the skies over Iraq. Libby Casey is live in Washington right now. And Libby, what is the White House saying about how these drones are being used?
Well, the White House is referring us back to the Department of Defense, and there are reports out that Predator drones, armed drones, are overseas in Iraq. Now, there have been unmanned and manned aerial flights. Of course, unmanned aerial flights is another way of saying drones. What's significant about this development is to see them actually armed, and they could serve two purposes. One, surveillance, which has been ongoing. Drones have been in the sky along with manned aerial flights to get surveillance, to give information to folks on the ground. But armed Predator drones could also act as protective resources. They could protect the American forces that are there in Iraq doing this initial assessment, but also giving information to the Iraqi forces battling ISIL.
And Libby, in the meantime, Secretary Kerry has been engaging in shuttle diplomacy, trying to ease the tensions not only in Iraq, but in the region. Where is he now?
Yeah, he's in the city of Jeddah on the Red Sea in western Saudi Arabia, meeting with King Abdullah. Now, this comes on the heels of meetings in Paris yesterday with representatives of Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and UAE. And U.S. officials say Secretary Kerry has had some key messages he's been trying to communicate. The most important, that the U.S. has not decided yet whether or not to launch airstrikes in Iraq, but it still does reserve the right to make that decision. The other message he's communicating, that a destabilized Iraq is not just dangerous for the Iraqi people, but it's dangerous for the entire region. Now, as of yesterday, U.S. officials say that those Middle East allies were not offering any military assistance or military efforts. These conversations are, of course, still ongoing today with King Abdullah himself.
Meanwhile, the landscape in Syria shifting as well. The White House asking for $500 million to arm some resistance there. Tell us more about that.
That's right. The language the White House is using is that it wants Congress to sign off on $500 million on money that would go to appropriately vetted elements of the moderate Syrian opposition. It would be used for things like defending the Syrian people and stabilizing areas that are under oppositional control. Of course, many questions about just how those moderate rebel forces would be vetted, how that process would work. This does come on the heels of President Obama outlining his foreign policy a month ago in a speech at West Point, where he talked about wanting to be able to partner with allies in the region. So the White House is also asking for money for that greater partnership. But members of Congress, some of whom have been pushing for a while for the U.S. to get more involved with rebel forces, are asking about just how they would make sure the arms don't get in the wrong hands.
Libby Casey, following the diplomatic developments for us out of Washington. Libby, thank you very much.